To ASH CIHE research webinar on shared stories, the journey of a 2024 to 2025 Fulbright Scholar to Saudi Arabia, presented by our very proud Dr. Ann Bodine Al-Sharif. Yay! Thank you all for joining us. Before I forget, my name is Katie. I am an associate professor in Student Affairs program at the University of Georgia, and I also serve the CIHE community as a chair for this year. As part of the tradition of the ASH programs, we'll do the land acknowledgement before the session begin. And as we are facing the 2025 ASH convention season coming in November, and the convention is happening in Denver, Colorado. So we're going to do the land acknowledgement for the Colorado and Denver. We want to honor and acknowledge the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Kane, and Arapaho people. In addition, we also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado, host of the upcoming 2025 ASH Convention. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of indigenous people. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of oppression and inequities and recognize the current and future contributions of indigenous communities within the space. And also, in addition to this land acknowledgement, as I live and work in Georgia, the Georgia is the original homeland of Ute and Apache neighbors. Before we get into the session and welcome to our wonderful speaker, I'd like to talk about what's the community of CIHE. So CIHE is a Council on International Higher Education. As the research community, we provide a forum for the dissemination and discussion of research in order to advance research and theory on higher education from competitive and international perspective. So we like to provide a formal structure within ASH for scholars with interest in international higher education can promote theory and research to explore contrasting cultural and international perspectives in the study of higher education. And also, I'm very proud to say that CIHE is one of the best councils. We are not competing at all, but this is really the best council. And there's a QR code here. If you scan it, it will link to our membership and how to join the membership. So there are the benefits if you join and enjoy all the benefits and contributions that we can offer. These are the lists of our CIHE Community Executive Board member. And today's speaker, Marianne, is also a proud Executive Board member of CIHE. And also, I like to highlight that this is the convention season. So this year, the ASH 2025 is held in between November 12th to 15th in Denver. And if you look at the bottom part of the screen, CIHE, we have a pre-conference the whole day on Wednesday, November 12th from 8 a.m. to 6:30. It's in Sheraton, Denver downtown. And before that official pre-con for CIHE, we have our own CIHE reception on Tuesday night. So it's been our tradition that we have the Tuesday night reception before we have a pre-conference for CIHE. So for this year, it's on Tuesday night, November 11th from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and the location is amazing. So it's in the Sheraton Denver, the conference hotel, but we're gonna have the session at the presidential suite. So we are looking forward to seeing all of you. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce amazing speaker of today's session, Dr. Mary Ann Bodine Al-Sharif, the Associate Professor in Higher Education Program at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. As a researcher, Mary Ann focuses on student identity development, international and global education, and issues of social justice and advocacy within higher education. And today, she's going to talk about her wonderful journey as a Fulbright Scholar. So let me stop sharing my screen, and Mary Ann will share her screen, and then I'm going to introduce Mary Ann. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here to talk about your wonderful experiences.
Thank you so much. I'm actually quite excited to be here and talk about this. So thank you for that. I want to start by talking just a little bit about what a Fulbright Scholar, what the Fulbright Scholar program is. It is a flagship international educational exchange program that is sponsored by the U.S. government. Once you are acknowledged as a Fulbrighter, you are forever a Fulbrighter. This really helps your career pathway, opens doors for future research, and gives you some prominency in your field. It's not just for faculty, it's also for scholars who are up and coming, administrators, graduate students, PhD students. But I think it's important to note that it does take on a bit of responsibility. You are seen in the country and sent to the country that you're visiting as a cultural ambassador. And I would argue that it's not just for the purpose of cultural diplomacy, but also academic diplomacy, and how you share the work that you do from a very culturally responsive perspective. So the program that I went through was the Fulbright Scholar Program, and there are 3 branches to that. You can be a Fulbright visiting scholar and do a 3 to 9 month program where you go and teach, conduct a little research, and then really pursue other things that that institution would like for you to do with them. Is a very beautiful collaboration in that space. You can also go through the specialist program where you're there for a much shorter period of time, 2 to 6 weeks, and in that role, you're more of a consultant working on curriculum, maybe some faculty development, institutional planning, other things that the institution needs from you that you can offer your service for. Or you can do the program that I did where you go as an American scholar, a researcher, and you're there solely for the purpose of conducting research, and then you may be asked to do some workshops or some lectures or consult on a few things, but your main focus in that aspect is the research itself. There are opportunities also for non-US scholars to participate in Fulbright. And so these are the 4 options that are currently available. Visiting scholar, we have about 900 faculty a year and professionals that come to the US and participate in higher ed in multiple ways, teaching, research, and so forth. Scholar in residence, this would be someone who comes for a semester or full academic year, teaches a course or a series of courses, helps develop curriculum, gives guest lecturing about the work that they're doing in their home country. You can do an enrichment program. And so this is really allows someone to better experience like America and increase, again, some academic diplomacy, some cultural diplomacy between countries through higher ed. And then there's the outreach lecturing fund. And this is where you can host Fulbright visiting scholars who are already in the United States, but may come from a different space to come and do some speaking engagements on particular areas that they have expertise within at your institution. So the application process, I feel like I need to preface this by saying that no two people have the same experience in this process, and I really learned that. But there are some staples that everyone will go through. I immediately, if you're interested in doing something with Fulbright, I think it's important to know that it's about a 12 to 18 month application process. You'll need to develop a strong research proposal, so you need to work on that early, really think about that early, which means you also need to really think about building those relationships early with your proposed partner abroad. Once you start working on the application for Fulbright, you got to be prepared because things are going to shift and change as you're in the midst of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about some huge pivots that I had to do during the application process. Applications usually open in mid-September before the award year. So you have all this preparation time in advance where you're working, and then September you have to have it all together and get it submitted. I think it's mid-September this year, 2025. Um, and then you also have to take into consideration not only Fulbright's deadlines and stuff. For many institutions, some have Fulbright offices, some don't. Mine does and doesn't. It's an interesting conversation, but so your institution may have internal deadlines. They may treat the scholarship, because this is a scholarship program, they may treat it more like a grant process, and then you have internal deadlines that you must follow with your institution. You want to make sure that you do everything that is required of your institution and Fulbright. So you may be following two paths with different timelines that are parallel to one another. And I think that's important to note. So just to give you a little idea of kind of what was going on during my process, I actually began thinking about doing Fulbright in April of 2023. And it was because Fulbright did this kind of push, and I got this advertisement in my email, and I was like, ah, why haven't I thought about that? And so I started looking into it. I went and spoke to my chair, spoke to my dean. And the challenge for me is that I'm a faculty of one in my program. So for my program here at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, I am the only full-time faculty. So for me to do something like this is a challenge in and of itself logistically. And initially I was told, well, why don't you look at doing something in the summer? And the problem is that Saudi Arabia doesn't accept Fulbright scholars in the summer because of how their schedule works, right? The cultural differences there in terms of higher ed. And so I really had to be thoughtful and have a lot of long conversations with the chair and the dean about how to make that opportunity work. And what I ended up having to do was, instead of taking the full year long, I had to shorten it to 4 months, and I had to put it in the middle of the academic year in the US so that I could meet my contract requirements, because you have to negotiate those things. I ended up having to teach all of my courses the first 7 weeks of the fall semester so that I could then leave November 1st, spend 4 months in Saudi, and come back the 1st of March. And 2 weeks after landing, teach all of my classes for the spring semester, the last 7 weeks of the semester. And so again, it looks different at every institution. Some institutions are going to give you the whole year. They're going to hire someone to come in and to teach for you, or they're going to have other faculty that are in the program cover while you're out. I know at my institution, everyone had a very different experience in this way. There were 3 of us who received a Fulbright the year that I went, and one of them had their school hired someone to be temporary and cover them for the whole year so that they could do the whole year experience. Another one, other faculty and staff covered for them on their job duties. But when you're a faculty of one, it just looks a lot different in the space that you're in. In May, I started reaching out, trying to figure out what the process was. I talked to the research office here, and they were like, we had somebody else in the School of Ed who had done a Fulbright. Why don't you get with them? So I got with another faculty member who really gave me a lot of information and mentored me. We have a formal office on campus for research, but at the time we didn't have anyone in there that was doing a lot of guiding on the Fulbright experience other than how to market yourself once you had received it. And so that wasn't helpful in the beginning stages. So that faculty member, the mentoring that I got there was very vital. Between May and August, I needed to start finding my partner abroad. And I sent out, and I'll talk about my positionality to this work in a little bit, but I sent out some emails and tried to get connected with people, and I found a partner, and I was so excited, and I worked with that partner most of the summer. But when we got to uh, end of July, early August, that partner, the individual, because these are individual relationships, right? That individual ended up getting promoted and moved to a different university through the system there. And at the new university, they didn't want to take me on. So we did all of this work, and I really thought I'm not going to get to go, and this is the end of it. But I work with a lot of Saudi students here in the US. And one of the students I had partnered with for some research came by my office and she goes, Dr. Mary, how are you doing? What's going on? Have you submitted your application? And I was like, ugh, no. Here's what happened. And she said, oh my goodness, let me see what I can do. And she made a couple phone calls to some people she knew, and they made a couple connections. And by that afternoon, I was actually connected to a completely different university, a completely different partner. And I literally had a good cry. And I said, here's where I'm at. Here's what I have. Here's the proposal that we've been working on. Would you be interested in being my partner? And within a 20 minutes of a Zoom meeting, that individual graciously said yes. And the ball started moving from there. And we had a whirlwind of getting paperwork and things done to submit. And so in September, I submitted that application. Then in December of 23, I received a notification that we had made it through the first level of the review, and that my application was then being moved on to the host country, the US Department of State, and the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board for review. I got an email in early February saying, on Sunday, February 11th, 2024, we need you to be available for an interview. And I thought, well, my mentor never told me that we had to do an interview process. And I said, okay. Reached out to my mentor who had guided me through the process, and she was like, I didn't have to do that. I have no idea what this is. And that's when I learned that there's lots of different processes and different layers depending on what institution, what country that you're going to. And I just so happened had partnered with KSAL. KSAL isn't under the Ministry of Education, it's under the National Guard. And so it's set up a little bit differently. And so when I got on the Zoom that morning, I was on with representatives from the embassy in Saudi, representatives from the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board, and the liaisons between the U.S. government and the Saudi government to ask a lot of questions. And the biggest question was, hey, this is a medical university and you don't do anything in medicine. Why are you going there? And so I had to really explain, first of all, my cultural connection to Saudi Arabia, but then also that the work that I was doing was related to the structures and functions of higher education, that it didn't matter what institution I was going to. I wasn't looking at the content of what they provide to their students, but actually at the structures that build the programs that they have. So March 18th, I received notification that we had been awarded, and November of 2024, I arrived in Riyadh and partnered with my institution at Nuf Al-Harbi, the amazing faculty who took me on to do this work. So I do want to talk just briefly about my positionality, and I think this is so important when you do anything like this at this magnitude. And so, if someone would have told that little girl in the blue dress with the pigtails back then that she wasn't going to stay on the farm forever, that she was going to meet this other cute little guy down here at the bottom, and that one day they would get married, she would finish her dissertation on the study of the development of higher ed in Saudi Arabia at the University of Oklahoma, that they would raise these three kids, and that she would become a Saudi scholar and a Saudi fellow, and then move on to be a Fulbright representative. She wouldn't have believed it. And sometimes I still don't. But I've had some amazing opportunities in my life to travel. And as a first generation college student, like this is a huge accomplishment for me and for my family to be in this space. And this is my student, Najla, over here on the side. She's the one that made the phone call for me. And later I will show you her husband and talk a little bit about the way that he has supported me as well. But my biggest supporter in this project was Nufal Harbi. And I just got to say, when you step into a collaborative program like this, you've got to expect the unexpected. And she was amazing to help me get through the program, to get me there. We had to do a lot to make this happen, more than just filling out an application and providing an invitation. There was a lot more that had to be done. My home institution had to negotiate my contract, had to make arrangements for my teaching. Dissertation and thesis committees, I was still seeing students while I was in Saudi who were in dissertation and thesis via Zoom. I had to make sure all my committees here were covered. I had to get institutional permission to travel. I had to talk about my salary and benefits and what was going to happen there. With my partner institution, we had to do an agreement on the project. We have city training here in the US. KMARC is the IRB system in Saudi. So she had to do city training for me. I had to do KMARC training for her so that we could get both of our IRB approvals. She provided us with a letter of invitation. I had to secure my own visa here. And the particular space that I had to go to do this through the embassy was actually in Houston. I had to get medical clearance. I am a person with some disabilities, and so that was a whole nother layer that we had to go through. And then I had to work with Fulbright to secure flights. And while all this was going on, I had to figure out who was going to take care of my dogs while I was gone for 4 months, and the house and the bills and all of those things that I wouldn't be able to do. But it was an amazing opportunity. These are the amazing individuals that I got to work with in the medical education program at KSEL, Health Science Institution. The title of the work that we did while we were there is called The Institutional Perspectives for the Practice, Policy, and Context of Saudi Higher Education. And there's a lot of purposes to this work. We collected a lot of data, and there's several papers that will come out of this work. And I'm only in the very beginning stages of putting these things together. But really just looking at how Saudi is using higher education as a force to develop the country, to create indigenous knowledge so that they can modernize both the workforce, the educational system, the goal here to be able to compete in a global world. Also, I think it's important to note that, the Vision 2030 plan is really the roadmap for the future as far as structural development goes. And higher education plays a very pivotal role in this space. But there are a lot of things that need to be done structurally, and these are things that they're putting into place now. They are in process as their higher education system is functioning and meeting the needs of people. It is also being structured and created at the same time. And so, they're working to develop consistent standards, assessment processes, looking at accreditation for the first time in several spaces. So there's a lot of things going on there. They do not have a formal program for higher education administration or any type of degree in higher education. And one sign of a developed world is the implementation of that degree. Because when you get to the point where you can turn the microscope on yourself and start to investigate how you put things together and what that looks like and what processes need to be there, that's when in higher education you're finally at a point of development where you can start now driving the car instead of building the car, right? So why does it matter? This is so important to the Vision 2030 plan. I can't even begin to state in so many ways why this research matters. We're mapping out processes. We're looking at protocols that are in place. We're seeing the challenges and spaces for more work to be done. But most importantly, it's about sustainability, to create the workforce that they need and to get individuals in the right spaces across the country. The kingdom recognizes that the oil industry is not going to maintain forever, and that they have got to build their people. So really the functionality, the sustainability, and the structures within their higher education system is highly important to that growth, to setting up this stage for success for the long term. Also, we need more research in this space. We need to know really how it's working for them, what takeaways we can take, and how this can be used in other spaces where the rest of the developing world is still moving forward. It looks different in every space, and if we can start mapping the successes, then we can share that work in other spaces, and we can help move other places forward as well. So my preliminary findings really come from two different perspectives, looking at human capital. And the work that I wanted to do was to look at the student experience, faculty experience, administrators experience, professional practitioners, those working in student affairs, enrollment management, and then staff. I was able to get a lot of data collected with the first four. Staff is a little bit more difficult, and I did not manage that. In terms of infrastructure, there were four levels that needed to be addressed. The top level being the Ministry of Education and its oversight of higher ed, then institutional, the university that I was at, the specific college that I was working in, and then what does it look like at departmental levels as well. So I'm going to share with you just some preliminary findings related to each of those. So when we look at students, what we know is that faculty are their first go-to in times of crisis, when they need support academically, for just about anything. And the faculty are so responsive. I cannot speak highly enough about the role of faculty at the institution where I was at. Decision making is based on need. So the one challenge there is there's not a lot of proactive. It's when a student comes forward and says, "Hey, we need more computers in this space," or transportation is an issue, or we need some more help with time management. It's when a student comes with the need. So thankfully, many students do speak up, but not all do. And so this is a challenge. There's not a lot of proactive there, but again, faculty are so supportive and are the first ones to act when there is a need acknowledged. Counseling is key to their success. The counseling center, there with the medical education program in the school that we were at, the counseling center and the service that it does, not just to that program, not just to that school, but to the institution, is huge. And students are struggling with a lot of things, being first generation college students, first time away from home, having to travel so far back and forth, challenges at home. Many are dependent on the stipend to get back and forth to college. So there's a lot of realities that students are living through. Their challenges, everything is taught in academic English. There's limited options across majors at the graduate level. So you finish your undergraduate degree, there may not be a graduate program to go to, even if you have that desire. So there's a lot of dependency on being able to study in other spaces or abroad. Commute and transportation is challenges. Maybe the family has one car to get back and forth. Time management and study skills. And I would say that one of the biggest challenges is the K-12 preparation. There are varying levels of preparation, and I think the bigger challenge there is the English language. So we're using English as the academic language at the university level, but at the K-12 level, that English preparation in some spaces is really strong, and so other spaces may not be as strong. And in some spaces they're getting conversational language, but they're not getting classroom science language in English. So this creates real challenges in the classroom. Many of them have desires to be faculty, to work and live near their family. They want to study abroad. They want to serve the communities that they're at. Our professional practitioners, our student affairs folks, those who are working in enrollment management and support systems in that way. Many times there's a misalignment with their academic credentials and their current roles that they're in. So they're many times more qualified than the space that they're working in. So many of them kind of feel stuck, like there's not a pathway forward for them. They have minimal voice in decision making, and that's a challenge sometimes. There's also a lot of underutilization of the skills that they do have to bring to the table. They have big aspirations. Many of them do want to further their education. Some seek faculty roles. Some are more focused on family. They're like, hey, if I don't make it to the next level, it's okay. I may just stay at home. I may get married. I may move on. And then some want to work in industry. Some want to open their own businesses. It's a very unique mix, but also very challenging. Our faculty, there is, oh, so many challenges in this space. And I think this is where much of my research will come from, is from the work with the faculty. But there many times is a misalignment with academic credentials and their current role. We're finding that many of them are having to put their research on the back burner because they have either a joint appointment or they have dual roles that they're serving in. And so while they have a lot of voice in the decision-making process, there's so many levels that those conversations have to go through to get approval that the need is today, but the response and approval may be, next semester. And so that is a challenge. Things move so slow in that sense. So there's a lot of bureaucracy that has to be gone through. There's terrible workload imbalance. And I think for faculty, it's important for me to say, when our students are attending here in the United States, they finish their degree and they go back, many times they're not just going back as assistant professors, they may be going back as assistant professor and an assistant dean, or an assistant professor and a vice president over a different area or unit. And that goes back to, again, we're building this system while we're also running this system and having the qualifications to fit in those roles. Here in the United States, I don't think that we would often see an assistant professor coming straight out of graduate work and doctoral defense into a faculty role immediately and an administrative role at the same time. There are challenges there for those who are in STEM and they are trying to do research. The other challenge that they face is getting the supplies that they need to complete. So if your research is dependent upon lab work and you order the lab supplies that you need, while it's available to you and you can get it, you may not get a full delivery. You may get half or a third of what you've actually requested. And this becomes a challenge then for you to complete the research that you've started. And so these are just symptomatic, I think, of being in a developing space, of trying to do so many things, wearing so many hats at the same time. And then so we see that there's inefficiency in some spaces, and sustainability then becomes a real challenge. However, I do want to say that one thing that they really need and would really support them in many ways is a mentorship program. There's a lack of a formal mentorship program. But I also want to say in that same breath that who will be their mentor? Many of these individuals are the founding, are currently going to be the founding fathers, so to speak, of higher education there. So while they're not getting perhaps all the mentorship and guidance that they need and the structures that are being built, they too will probably end up being the mentors for the next generation. And so this is the challenge of being in that kind of in-between space in the work that you're doing. So impostership is a huge issue. Work-life balance is obviously a big issue. And we also find that many of them are also, on top of all the other things they're doing, they have other jobs that they're working on outside of the university. And so that is too a challenge. When we look at administrators, what we see is that they have a continual push from the Ministry of Education, from the government, to advance, to create research institutions that are going to be the next Harvard, right, of the Middle East, to make those rankings and to be globally recognized. And so this constant pressure keeps them, in constant motion. And sometimes you just want to say, everybody stop and take a breath so we can catch up with what needs to be done. But there's no time for that because the pressure is there to build. And I think sometimes, when we think about the individuals in leadership, from an American perspective, I think sometimes we view the Middle East, we view those who are working in these spaces very differently. Like what we might misinterpret as arrogance is really fear of failure. We have to push on. We have to do more. It's not about big is better. It's about we have to create a workforce that's going to survive, that's going to move our country, our nation forward. And so that immense pressure on administrators is challenging in so many ways. They've got accreditation requirements that they're trying to balance and figure out, as many of these across different disciplines are just now being implemented. And and all coming from the Ministry of Education. Finding great and qualified faculty. They have a lot of faculty coming in. They have a lot of courses that need to be taught. But they don't always have faculty in the right spaces. And part of this has to do if we think about the culture in Saudi Arabia and much of the Middle East, families live together, they're in the same space. So while we might have qualified faculty in the country, their family, everything that is within their unit where they want to be is in one space while the job is over here. And the concept of leaving family to go that far, in America, we don't think about that, right? Moving from one state to the next. My goodness, I think I've lived in 7 states since I've been here. But that looks very different in a country that has a collective identity where family is so important. So getting great qualified faculty for the roles that you need. And this creates some of that misalignment in your job responsibility or the areas that you're working in compared to what you should be doing based on the degrees that you have. And so there's a lot to be done there in terms of faculty enhancement and development, mentoring, coaching. And then decision making while they have a voice, while they're part of the decision making. Again, it takes time to get through all the bureaucracy that's the different stages that's set up there. But they all want to have the best curriculum, the best institution, the best of everything within their role. But they're challenged with keeping up with those advancements. When I asked them what they wanted to do next, what they saw in their future, many of them said retirement. And I think, they've been in that space so long, working so hard. When we look at the infrastructure, so this is kind of what it looks like. The Ministry of Education, right, provides these overarching guidelines for the infrastructure and provides autonomy to each institution. I'm very thankful to say it was very honoring for me, humbling for me. In the spring of 2019, I was a Saudi fellow. I was invited by the Ministry of Education to come and to look at some of the processes they were doing. And one of the particular things that I got to look at and work with was the whole concept of autonomy within higher ed there. And so it was really great. I was doing some data collecting, and my participant just happened to say, hey, we have what she called the blue book, and it's kind of what the infrastructure is, how things are set up. And when it came back to me, I realized that this was actually something that I had worked on the years before in 2019, defining autonomy. So it was amazing to kind of see that full circle moment for me. That was an aha moment for me. And then the institution is building the plane while they're flying it. There's just no other way to say it. And this is a challenge. Innovation sometimes outweighs available resources and the human capital that's there to create that growth. Within the colleges, key forms of organizational management are present, but it's very underdeveloped. And this is a lack of mentoring. And this is also not having mentors. And it's also having very young mid-level management moving these systems. And they're very much learning by fire, so to speak, having to learn and to engage and to develop as the institution in higher ed is also developing. And then just departmentally, just the credentialing challenges. I can't say mentoring enough, mentoring, leadership development. And they are doing more right now with leadership development programs. They do have some things that are in place, but it's not for everyone. And sometimes it's by invitation and sometimes it's by application. So, and the problem with that is that it's not what they need right now when they're hands on the job. So it really creates some imbalance in workload, and for sustainability purposes for all of these areas, I would say sustainability is going to be the biggest challenge because we're creating things and then having to figure out really where we're going to go next with that and how we're going to maintain it. So implications for research, things that need to be done. There's more work to be done related to students looking at the K-12 preparation program, especially if English is going to continue to be the academic language. I strongly advocate for grounded theory research. It's desperately needed to address some particulars related to the Saudi student identity because it looks different, and Western and the global North ideology and theory just does not address those needs or really truly represent the identities of these students. And so there's much more work to be done in that space by Saudis for Saudis. professional practitioners, those working in student affairs, enrollment management positions, support staff that are in those spaces. Really, we need to know a little bit more about who these individuals are, the roles that they have, the impact that it has both in the academic and workforce trajectories for these individuals. Faculty, definitely role responsibilities. I was thinking about role socialization and what that looks like in terms of tenure and promotion. And then also in terms of how we move forward, right? There just has to be more done in that space. And then credentialing, really understanding that some doctoral degrees are not PhDs, some are EDDs, some have unique practitioner doctoral programs and credentials. And so there's really some misalignment and misunderstanding about the different types of credentials that are available. And when you think about it, when you've sent the majority of your current faculty abroad to multiple countries and universities globally, and they're coming back, they are going to all come back with various credentials, and really creating a system that can understand what those credentials mean and how those credentials are applied in the field is something that is desperately needed. Administration, again, leadership development, there needs to be some formalized programming here, more formalized programming, and it needs to be culturally responsive. We need multi-level administration communication pathways. Communication is a huge issue. I remember when I asked multiple people, do we have a rule or a regulation for this? What is the policy? And some people would call people, and some people would say, oh, let me ask so and so. Oh, I have a copy that I printed from the website the last time I looked for it, and that was 2 years ago. There are central locations where things are at, but we're not communicating that those things are there. When policy changes, many times the website is updated, but there's not always communication out to everyone that the policy has changed. And so if you think about that, and then all the levels of bureaucracy between committees that you have to go through to create change, only to find that that policy has changed and you can't do it this way, or there's another way that's already been established. So you get halfway through the process and you have to start over. And so the communication pathways really have to be aligned. And then mid-level administrators, they're caught between the directives of the upper administration and the demands of those that are working under them, and they're also trying to be faculty at the same time. This is a lot for any individual, but this is the space that these mid-level, in particular, administrators are working in. We still need to know a lot more about student affairs and the supporting role. I saw faculty doing a lot of work that I would think from a Western lens really belongs in student affairs. And at the same time, I saw a lot of work done by student affairs in terms of co-curricular activities and things that they're doing in other spaces. The career development pathways readiness really needs to be better understood, how they're doing that, what that looks like. I think there's more work to be done in that space. And then just educational achievement and development, making sure that we don't have, individuals with educational levels working in spaces that isn't best utilizing them in the role, right? What are those pathways to educational achievement that turn out to be a public good for them and then for the society there? When we think about practice, immediate needs, right? That formal faculty mentoring program, I don't think that can be ignored. I think that's something that definitely needs to be established to help kind of mitigate the multiple hats that are being worn. Leadership development for all administrators, mid-level up. Not just upper administrators, not just those that need to be moved to or they're wanting to move to upper level, but those mid-level also need that formal training. Clear split between academic and administrative roles. Definitely that needs to be defined. Assessment for the dual and the joint appointments. Many times we have to question who do they report to? Do they report to both entities, to one entity? Some are not reporting to any entities. They've got these dual roles and they're just running with it, right? So that needs to be addressed. And then future growth and accountability. They have got to start thinking, especially as the the Ministry of Education and the government is moving to more autonomy, they've got to start thinking about role accountability. Related to student enrollment and financial accountability. Right now, all the finances kind of comes down. There's not a lot of here's your budget for your department, here's your budget for your area. And so many times they're frustrated when they don't get the need, but the faculty and the administrators at the lower levels may not fully understand what the budget is or what is capable. And so I think that these are challenges that they've never had to have the discussion of you need 12 bottoms and seats to have a full class. So that's a very different concept. And, you know, from my Western lens, of course, that's what I see. But I think that that accountability is still going to have to come. It needs to be implemented in a culturally responsive way, but it still needs to be addressed, especially as they move forward with more autonomy. And then when we think about the national level, right, uh, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development have got to start working together to kind of track workforce needs. You know, there's overdevelopment of some educational programs, and so we have oversaturation of some degree awards while we have shortages in other spaces. And a lot of that is because there's no formal system for really tracking workforce needs across the country. And that is desperately needed in order to be in alignment with higher education. Challenges, right? When I think about the challenges that I faced while I was there, my biggest challenge was I'm a qualitative methodologist. And I know that one of the reasons I was chosen was also because I'm a qualitative methodologist, and qualitative research is not always overwhelmingly preferred in the Gulf region. Everything is done quantitatively. So humanizing the work that they're doing, but also understanding what it is. And I know when I think about the whole process of getting the IRB and all the things that we did in that space, our goal was to get all the information that we could from a very humanistic perspective. But then even after being approved for IRB, I still had to go back and really explain what exactly I'm doing, what this methodology is. The concept of being both a researcher and a researcher participant, and writing a dual ethnography or critical autoethnography. These are very foreign concepts in that sense to the work being done. So this was really a challenge, really being seen as a true scientist, or being truly scientific in these methodologies as a cultural challenge. And I will be honest and say that the geopolitical circumstances that were happening here in the United States and globally had a direct impact on me while I was abroad. I am one of the individuals whose funding was impacted the last month that I was there. We got notification, I guess it was early January, that our funds might be limited or frozen, and my funds were definitely frozen. And it wasn't until right before I went to leave that I got a partial funds, and I got another partial fund given back to me. I think it was like last month. Um, but I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the time there. I'm thankful that I did have the family connection. I'm thankful that my family stepped up and paid my rent and helped me to get groceries while we were trying to figure out what does it mean. Not everybody that was there with me had that same experience. And mine was what I would call a short-term impact, but for somebody who was there for a much longer period than I was, and I know one researcher who was, and had family, this was a worse than a challenge. It was devastating because you don't know. You don't know if you're going to be able to stay in your home. You don't know if you're going to be able to feed your family. This was a real situation. And Fulbright is set up differently in different countries. In some countries, the host country is paying for your stay there. In some countries, it's split between the host country and the US. But in Saudi Arabia, the US paid our full funding. And so for those who were there on a much longer term than I was, this was a huge impact for them. And I think that's something that we have to be real about. Um, and I'll stop there because I could go on all day. My lessons learned, these beautiful people are amazing. You never know who you're really going to learn from. I learned a lot from the institution. I learned a lot from the work that I did. Here in the middle, Dr. Aziz, he is Najla's husband. He helped me and gave me these wonderful I'm going to call them research assistants, these wonderful, amazing individuals to work with. They did a lot of groundwork for me, helped me to get my data collected, helped me to get connected to students, faculty, individuals who were professional practitioners across campus. The research that I did was not done alone. It was done because of these individuals, and it would not have happened without them, and that is a fact. So I am so thankful for the support and the lessons that I learned from these individuals. And this guy over here, that's my husband. I've got my arm around, but that's my driver. His name was Shaquille, and Shaquille spoke 5 languages and English very fluently. And he drove me back and forth everywhere that I went. Actually, while I was there, because my husband was only with me for a short time, he was back and forth 8.5 hours away taking care of his mom who was ill. And Shaquille taught me how to interpret things, how to understand cultural misunderstandings I was having. Talked about his uh, his role in the work that he does. You know, transporting back and forth his goals, um, missed opportunities. Opportunities taken. He helped me to understand cultural nuances that sometimes I didn't get. And if I didn't have someone close by that I could ask at the end of the day, I always knew I could say, "Hey, Shaquille, this happened today. What does that mean?" And he would explain for me. And so I think when you go on trips like this, when you do scholarship like this, that you have to recognize that not everything you learn is at the institution. And not everything that you learn has to be academic. And so when you think about cultural diplomacy, these are the people who taught me cultural diplomacy. I did have some amazing opportunities though. On Fulbright, there is a 2-week period. I had a 90-day stay visa, which meant every 90 days I had to leave the country. And when I left, that was on me. You have to pay for that 90-day. When you have to leave and exit and come back in, that's not on Fulbright. That's on you. So like you've got this whole year to plan. So you got to plan for those finances too. And I got to hop over to Qatar University. I met with Wadad Al-Husani. She's a member of IASIS, also a member of NASPA's global division. It was really nice to get a tour of Qatar University, but also then to connect and talk about possibilities for research. So here's a bonus ad that I got to visit another country right next door, but also to create another line of opportunity for research and academic diplomacy. And then Declan Coran was he was actually there with the United Nations, and these wonderful ladies, again, that I'm always with, Nof and Nof here on the one side next to each other, they were able to work with Nadine on the other side of me and set up a time to meet with Declan. So I got to work with a representative from the UN for a little bit that day, and it was an amazing experience to look at the work he's doing about solving global issues from a very collaborative, multi-nation perspective, and to be in that space. And these were opportunities that were created, not expected. And I just want to say that those are the other things that if you take on an experience like this, you really got to think about. So what are my next steps? Um, I applied for a grant to try to help with some transcription, some cleanup, some analysis processes when I got here. And our financial crisis here with grants and other things kind of took that from me. So we're looking for other grant opportunities right now. I want to continue to work with CASAL. We were actually able to gather about 104 questionnaires, 63 interviews, and we're working on moving that into publications, the very early stages still yet. Want to assess opportunities for future research and potential growth to keep on with this investigation. By the way, this topic was the topic of my dissertation, so we are 20 years into this now. I don't want to lose that momentum. And then seek further ways to connect and collaborate. These are the things I'm going to miss. Um, and I think I don't have to explain any of it. This is KSAL, the university that I was at up in the top. It's my favorite thing to see on the highway. The food, um, we eat bad in America. That's all I can say. The best food I have ever had in my life was here. And I think I'm literally right at time. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Marianne. This is a lot of information, a lot of findings, a lot of research heavy content, and also a lot of touching emotions. So it's not just about the Fulbright journey, but it's beyond. It's beyond the researcher's life. It's about the culture. It's about the exchange. It's about the experiences. It's about all those learning and emotions, the families, community, and so on. So, well, thank you so much for for the wonderful talks and the session. We only have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to go over with the time, but I think that we have a time for a one brief question for the audience if there's any questions. And Marianne, I know that you shared your contact info, but can you put your email address in the chat so that if the audience has questions, then because of the time, then they can also contact you
Absolutely.
directly.
Absolutely.
Okay. Audience, if you do you have, I know that well still there's a lot of lingering thoughts and lingering feelings, but um before we wrap up the session, anyone have a question while the speaker is here? Laura, I saw your hand up, so you can go ahead and unmute and then ask question.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, council. Like this was excellent. Thank you for sharing your experience. I have a question as someone who is about to submit a Fulbright application about your experience in the political situation, that the Fulbright people are very touchy to address directly. But what can you say more about your experience with this administration and the administration of your Fulbright award? Is it reasonable to expect that people who are doing critical work will get a Fulbright at this point? Any
Yeah,
advice you have?
I can't speak. I can't speak for what will or will not be accepted, to be honest with you. I does that mean you should stop doing critical work? Absolutely not. Yeah, you continue on, you continue on with that trajectory. But the challenge for me was we were kind of in a pickle, for those of us who were there because
Mhm.
um we when we signed to go, if you leave early, there's a possibility that you have to pay everything back. And so for those who were getting no funding, then do you stay and pay out of pocket, especially if you have several more months to go, or do you leave and take the risk, and which one's going to cost less if you have to do that? That was kind of where many individuals were, and there was kind of a no communication going on at the time to guide or direct either way. And I think that that's something that you really do have to take into consideration. Would I do this again? Absolutely. Would I do it in another country? Sure. But I think I would go in eyes wide open, so to speak, really being prepared and recognizing that if this happens, what's my plan B? Because I think it's too unpredictable to say, yes, this could happen or no, that couldn't. I don't think anyone can make that decision at this point. But I do think that you most definitely have to really have a plan B and maybe a plan C to know exactly what those next steps will be.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for the great question, Laura, and great answer, Marianne. So, well, unfortunately, it's time for us to wrap up. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us and then learning from amazing Fulbright Scholar. We are very proud of you, Marianne, and thank you so much for taking your time and being here. Thank you, everyone. I will see you all in ASH convention or our next webinar. Thank you, ASH, for supporting us. Thank you, Marianne, of course, for being a wonderful speaker
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.